The day I received an $80,000 bill after being banned from my own daughter's wedding, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I poured a cup of tea and opened a folder I had labeled years ago, "In case of betrayal." For decades, I gave everything, my time, my home, my heart. They thought my silence meant permission. They were wrong. And trust me, that wedding invoice, it was just the beginning. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The envelope was thick, embossed, and bore no return address. I found it among the usual flyers and bills in my mailbox that morning, nestled like a secret waiting to be revealed. The ivory shimmer of the paper and gold-trimmed edges told me it was meant to impress. Someone had spared no expense. I stepped inside, closed the door, and peeled it open at the kitchen counter. The air felt still, like the house was holding its breath with me. Inside was a wedding invitation. Evalora's wedding, my daughter's. I scanned every word, twice, then a third time. My name wasn't on it, not even as a guest. There was no RSVP line addressed to me, no subtle hint that I was expected. I looked again just to be sure. I held it under the kitchen light like the missing ink might reveal itself in the glare. But it didn't. My hands began to tremble, not from age but from something more hollow. Confusion. No, it was something deeper. I couldn't name it yet, only feel it sitting like cold lead in my stomach. I sat down, the chair creaking beneath me as I clutched the invitation, trying to convince myself it had been an oversight, a printing error. But everything else about the invite was perfect. Every name accounted for, except mine. The quiet of my house suddenly felt hostile. I opened my laptop, typed in my email password with shaky fingers. Nothing from Valora. No messages. No save the dates. I grabbed my phone and checked texts. Call history. Voicemail. Nothing. Not since our last conversation 6 months ago. It was short. Cold. She had called about a tax document, barely said hello. I pulled out the photo album from the top drawer of my hutch, the one with her childhood birthdays, cake-smeared cheeks, giggles, candles I'd lit with shaking hands from too much coffee and too little sleep. There she was, age 7, beaming in a homemade princess dress I'd sewn from scratch after working the night shift at the hospital. What changed? I used to be the first person she called when she was sick, when her heart broke, when her car wouldn't start. But somewhere between then and now, the line between us blurred, thinned, and snapped. The phone rang just as I was about to close the album. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Hi, Grandma," came a tiny voice. "Eli?" I sat up straight, heart pounding. "Yeah. Mommy says I shouldn't talk long." His whisper was full of secrets, just like all 7-year-olds. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "Uh-huh. We're at Grandma Marcia's. Mommy says she's helping with the wedding stuff." My breath caught. Grandma Marcia. Valora's ex-mother-in-law. I hadn't heard that name in years, not since the divorce. Somehow she was now the one helping with the wedding. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "Are you having fun, baby?" "Yeah, there's a big cake. And Mommy tried on her dress. It's like a princess one." I couldn't let him hear the crack in my voice. "That sounds wonderful, Eli. I gotta go now. Mommy's coming." The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly. I had been replaced, not just excluded. Replaced. Later that evening, I wandered into my bedroom. The sun had dipped low, and golden light stretched across the floorboards. I opened my keepsake box, a weathered thing tucked under my bed, and pulled out a letter Valora wrote me years ago on my birthday. It read, "You're my hero, Mom. I'll never forget what you've done for me." Ever. I ran my fingers over the words. Then I crumpled the paper. But I didn't throw it away. I stared at the invitation again, lying cold on the nightstand. Was it ever real? Our bond? Or had I clung to something I imagined, like the edge of a dream that fades with morning? Outside, dusk crept over the cul-de-sac. I stood in the driveway, arms crossed to shield against the breeze. Across the street, my neighbors, Paul and Linda, had their whole family over again. Laughter spilled from their open window. A glow from the dining room lit up the yard. I used to have that. I whispered to no one in particular. Maybe this is how it ends. But the wind rustled the trees like a quiet protest. And something inside me, faint but stubborn, whispered back, not yet. The grocery store felt colder than usual. Maybe it was just me. I stood in front of the cereal aisle, staring at boxes I didn't intend to buy. My cart held nothing but a carton of eggs and a pint of milk. Somehow, this errand felt both necessary and pointless. As I reached for a box of oatmeal, I saw her, Valora. She didn't see me at first. She was pushing a cart filled with organic vegetables, a bouquet of peonies, and that fancy gluten-free cake mix she used to love as a teenager. She was with someone, an older woman I instantly recognized. Marcia, my ex-husband's new wife. They were laughing, like family. I didn't hide. I just stood there, oatmeal in hand, frozen. Valora turned her head, and for a split second, our eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't wave. She simply turned her head back to Marcia and said something that made them both laugh harder. It was a punch to the stomach. I placed the oatmeal back on the shelf, abandoned my cart, and left the store. I didn't cry. I just walked. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself parked in front of my old church. I hadn't been here since before the divorce. I sat in my car, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. Inside those walls were years of choir rehearsals, bake sales, and potlucks where Valora used to tug on my skirt, asking if she could have another cookie. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. Back home, I warmed a can of soup and turned on the TV for background noise. A home renovation show buzzed about reclaimed wood and open floor plans, but all I could hear was Eli's voice from yesterday. Mommy says I shouldn't talk long. Was she ashamed of me? Had I done something unforgivable? My mind spiraled through old memories, birthday cakes shaped like dolphins, spelling bee flashcards, late-night talks about college stress. That night, I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand, the one I hadn't touched in years. I pulled out a scrapbook I made for Valora's high school graduation. Each page was filled with little notes, ticket stubs, and photos of us laughing. Halfway through, I stopped. There was a photo from her prom night, me helping her with her corsage. She was beaming. I was proud. Was that real? Or was I just a placeholder until she could find someone better? I closed the book gently, careful not to let any of the pages wrinkle. Then I reached for the small notebook beside it. It was where I wrote letters I never sent. Tonight, I began a new one. Dear Valora, I wrote, I saw you today. You looked happy. I hope you are. I paused, pen hovering, then added, I miss you. That's all. I miss you. I didn't sign it. I closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. As I turned off the light, I whispered into the dark. Maybe this is how it ends. Or maybe it's where something else begins. It was spring of 2018 when I found myself seated at a cozy corner booth in Delilah's, that charming little bistro tucked into the quiet part of Midtown Sacramento. The patio smelled of jasmine from the trailing vines overhead, and Valora's laughter danced above the clinking of wine glasses and silverware. We were there to celebrate her big promotion, marketing director at a firm I could never quite pronounce. Avon, her new boyfriend back then, sat across from me in a tailored gray blazer, always composed, always polite. I raised my glass, feeling the flush of the Chardonnay warming my cheeks. Whatever your wedding looks like one day, I said with a chuckle. I'll support you, even if it's on a beach in Tahiti or a castle in France. Valora's eyes lit up, brighter than the candle in the middle of our table. She laughed, nodded, and clinked her glass against mine. Deal, she grinned. It was just a toast. Casual, offhand, something mothers say when they feel proud and want their daughters to feel loved. I didn't know I'd signed a contract that night. Weeks after that dinner, Valora and I met again, just the two of us, this time over coffee. And she wore a soft blue cardigan I remembered buying for her during college. She looked tired, but she always worked too much, too hard. I want my wedding to be perfect, she said, her fingers nervously circling the rim of her mug. The kind Dad would have wanted. Big, beautiful, unforgettable. I smiled and reached across the table. It will be. But it's so expensive, she whispered, eyes glassy. I don't want money to be the reason it feels small. She looked at me with such raw hope, and something inside me softened. I told her, it won't be. I promise. Later that same day, Avon pulled me aside while Valora chatted with a waiter about dessert. We stood by the brick fireplace near the back of the restaurant. He didn't raise his voice. In fact, it was the calmness in his tone that unsettled me more. You know, he said, investments in our kids' legacy are never really about the money. They're about the moments, the memories we create. I nodded politely, unsure of what he was getting at. I thought he was just trying to impress me. Now, years later, I see it for what it was. Planting the idea, gently coaxing me into a financial role I didn't realize I'd accepted. He smiled that quiet smile of his, the kind that feels more like a negotiation than a greeting. Back in the present, I sat at my kitchen table, rereading the invoice Valora had sent, the one detailing every expense of her wedding and honeymoon, $80,000 worth of dreams I apparently promised to fund. Then I saw her latest social media post, a glossy photo of her in a white dress beside a glittering fountain. The caption read, Mom promised this would be her gift to me years ago. My heart thudded. The toast, the coffee, that soft moment in the cafe where I said it wouldn't be money that ruined her day. That was what she meant. That was the promise she clung to. And now I was being billed for it. I sat in silence, staring at the paper trail of affection twisted into obligation. Was my mistake being too kind? Or was it trusting too much? I had always believed in giving freely, from love to help with bills to babysitting Eli without being asked. But now, it felt like those gifts had been weaponized. I folded the invoice neatly, slid it into a drawer, and whispered to myself, I'll confront her. Just not yet. Not until I understand why my daughter believes love comes with a price. The phone rang just as I was coaxing the last stubborn leaf from the mouth of my watering can. The hose had twisted again, like it always does, and I'd just bent down to fix it when I heard the sharp trill from inside. I almost ignored it. These days, most calls were spam or telemarketers asking if I wanted my air ducts cleaned, but then I saw the name, Valora. My hand froze. The watering can tilted slightly, dripping onto my sock. I let it. I pressed answer before I could talk myself out of it. Hi, Mom, she said, her voice a touch too bright. Just checking in. Eli had a little cold earlier this week, but he's better now. A call from Valora, after months of silence, should have felt like something. It should have stirred something warm in me. But instead, it felt like standing under a warm sun while watching a storm roll in. I'm glad he's feeling better, I said. It's been a while. There was a pause. Yeah, she said slowly. I guess it has. She talked about work, about her garden, even about a new cafe she tried last weekend. It was all strangely upbeat, like we hadn't last spoken through gritted teeth over the phone 7 months ago, when I dared to ask why she had pulled away. She didn't mention the wedding. Not once. I waited, but the words never came. "You got the invite, right?" she asked suddenly, slicing through the casual chatter like a blade. "I mean, I assume you saw it." I gripped the edge of the counter. "I did." "I just wanted to say, it's not personal, Mom. Let's not make things dramatic." Dramatic. The word hit like a slap. She was always using it when I asked questions she didn't like. "It's a small wedding," she continued. "Curated, intimate. We just want everyone to feel safe." I said nothing. "Some people might feel tension with you there," she added, her voice lowering like it was a favor, like I should be grateful for her euphemisms. "Safe from what? From me?" "You're saying I'm not welcome," I said quietly. "It's not that, it's just, you've been distant since Dad died. You kind of chose this, you know?" A lie dressed as truth, one that hurt worse because she believed it. Then I heard it. A voice, faint but distinct, behind hers. "Stick to the line we agreed." Avon. Valora hesitated. "You chose to keep your distance after Dad died," she said again, slower this time, like a line rehearsed. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind was too busy unraveling everything, every cold pause, every vague answer, every disappearing call. This wasn't a conversation, it was a performance, and I was no longer an audience member they cared to fool. "I see," I said, steadying my breath. I hung up before she could respond. The silence that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't crashing or wailing. It was soft. Final. I sat by the window with the invoice still lying open on the table. The same table where Valora once made macaroni necklaces, where Jonah read the newspaper every morning, where I learned how to stretch chicken into 3 meals and still make it feel like love. I didn't cry. I wasn't empty. I was clear. I whispered, "I didn't choose distance. I chose survival." The sky was the color of dishwater when I stepped outside. The plants were watered, the phone was silent, and the breeze carried the scent of lavender from the neighbor's yard. Mabel was on her porch again. She looked up from her knitting, meeting my eyes. She didn't ask anything. She just nodded, once, and went back to her hands. There's something about being seen, even without words, that steadies you, that lets you take one more breath. I nodded back. I stood there for a long time. And I knew. It wasn't my absence that created the silence. It was their rewriting of the story. Saturday afternoon, my inbox chimed again. Unlike the silence before, this message stood out. "Live stream starts in 10 minutes. No salutation, no explanation, just a link." I didn't know whether to click or close it. My instinct was to protect my heart, but curiosity won. I clicked, held my breath, and watched as the screen came to life. I saw a little boy in a perfectly crisp suit stepping into a beautiful church. It was Eli, the ring bearer. He held a satin pillow and nestled in soft folds were my late husband's cufflinks. My breath caught, tears blurred my vision. This was the moment he carried on without me, wearing pieces of me that I gifted long ago. I stared, motionless. Every memory of teaching him how to tie a shoelace or brushing his hair before school rushed back. Only now they felt like echoes from another life. Valora's voice flowed through the speakers, soft and rehearsed. "To all who chose to be here, physically or otherwise," she began, pausing to let the words settle. Then she smiled sweetly and added, "And to those who support without needing attention." A murmur of applause followed. Avon stood beside her, nodding in somber agreement. The words felt like barbs, a subtle jab at me, a reminder that my absence had become performance art, perfectly misunderstood, perfectly orchestrated. I rewound the stream. Faces flooded the screen, cousins, old friends, my own sister, all smiling, tearing up, celebrating without a flinch of regret. None of them called. None of them tried to include me. They chose Valora's narrative, and I wasn't in it. My fingers hovered over the remote. Do I turn it off? Do I delete it and pretend I never saw any of this? No. I watched until the screen went blue, the ceremony over, the moment claimed. The room was dark. My living room, with its soft lamplight and quiet corners, felt so full of absence. I opened my notebook and wrote one line. Good. You didn't miss anything. Yet. Mabel knocked gently on the door. She carried a tray with a cup of tea. Her kindness never wavered. I didn't watch it, she said quietly. I met her gaze and nodded. Good, I whispered back. You didn't miss anything. Yet. There was comfort in that small shared honesty, a sliver of peace that maybe, someday, what was missed could heal. The package arrived on a Wednesday, one of those Sacramento mornings when the sun dares you to feel calm. I opened the door to the postal worker's knock, expecting a catalog or maybe another retirement benefits letter. Instead, a flat envelope marked Certified Mail sat in her hand, with the newlyweds in elegant print as the return address. The weight in my chest tightened before I even touched it. My fingers hovered, as if handling something radioactive. I brought it inside and sat at the kitchen table, the one Jonah refinished back in '91. The grain of the wood seemed more alive than I was in that moment. I peeled the tab open. Inside was a glossy portfolio. Photos of the venue with garden arches, golden plates with pearl-trimmed napkins, and a pristine white sand beach labeled Bora Bora Honeymoon Itinerary. Attached at the end was a detailed invoice, $80,432. My eyes swept over line items like custom dress, $8,900, floral arch, $5,200, and honeymoon airfare, $7,000. I read it again, hoping it would vanish between blinks. It didn't. Then I saw the note. We thought you'd want to contribute, as you always do. Valora Avon. My body remained still, but inside something unfurled. Not pain, not even betrayal. Something colder, a widening space between my ribs. I reread the line, lips parted but silent. I walked over to Jonah's photo on the mantel, the one from our 25th anniversary in Carmel. I slid the invoice under the frame. Let him see what our daughter had done. I dialed Ava. Her voice came through after the second ring, bright and hesitant. Hey, long time. Did you know about this? I asked, no preamble. The invoice. The note. A pause. I thought you agreed to help, she said. Valora told us you'd be supporting their start, that it was your wedding gift. Did she show you anything? A letter? A text? The silence on the other end stretched so long I almost asked if she was still there. No, Ava finally replied. Just her word. I ended the call with a thank you that wasn't grateful. My voice didn't shake. My hands did. The next morning, I stood at the bank counter, the marble floor under my shoes suddenly unfamiliar. I asked to see records for any loans tied to my name. The officer returned after several minutes, holding a tablet. There is a co-signed loan for $28,000, he said, tapping the screen. For a travel package. My stomach twisted as I saw the document. There it was, my name, my social security number, and a digital signature that mimicked mine down to the last loop. But it wasn't mine. The forgery was clever. My yes had been manufactured. I asked for copies and walked out into the blinding sun, the papers pressed flat against my chest like armor. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in the living room, lit a single candle, and typed a calm, measured email to my lawyer. I attached the invoice, the loan paperwork, and the screenshots from my bank visit. Within an hour, I got a reply. We'll need to talk. This is serious. I didn't slam any doors. Didn't curse. I just turned off the lights, one by one, and stood by the window. They've always mistaken my silence for permission. The headline stared back at me like an accusation. Bride shares heartbreak over toxic mother's refusal to support wedding. It had over 5,000 likes and counting. There was a photo of Valora in her dress, taken from the live stream, soft lighting, the smile I used to coax out of her as a child, now beaming at strangers on the internet. Below it, her caption. We had our dream wedding, but my heart aches. My mother, who promised to support us, refused. She made it all about her. We've lost more than money. We've lost love. The comments were predictable. So sorry, girl. You deserve better. Cut that toxicity out, Queen. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until I felt a sharp ache in my chest. I closed the laptop, stood, then sat again. My fingers were trembling, not with sorrow, but with recognition. They always get ahead of the narrative. Twist the truth, set the tone, and leave me explaining silence in a storm they started. The phone rang. Avon, I said flatly, seeing the caller ID. His voice was syrupy smooth. We're not mad, just disappointed. We thought you were family. Family. Like the word still had meaning in his mouth. You forged my name, I said quietly. You used me, and now you call it betrayal when I object? A pause. Valora said you'd overreact. That word, overreact. I almost laughed. You committed fraud. He scoffed. You always made everything dramatic. It's why Valora keeps you at arm's length. Click. I didn't move. Not for a while. Then I reached for the trust binder. Valora's trying to reinterpret Jonah's memorial trust, my lawyer said. She's arguing the clause about future family development includes honeymoon reimbursements. My chest clenched. I need everything, she said. Statements, emails, the original trust documents. Already scanned, I replied. And there's more. I retrieved the folder from my closet, marked in my late husband's handwriting. In case of betrayal. He had drafted it during the estate planning, worried about manipulation. I never believed we'd need it, but betrayal doesn't arrive as a sword. It drips slowly, like poison in tea. I opened an old photo album, Valora's 6th birthday. Jonah holding the cake, me behind the camera, Valora beaming in a princess dress. She had insisted I not wear the same color as her. Only one princess today, she'd said. It was never about the wedding. It was about control. About Valora rewriting who the mother had been, and who she needed her to be now. How long had I ignored the signs? The snide jokes, the reshaped memories, the slow erasure of everything soft between us? I set up my phone, recorded a video, no tears, no rage, just words. When your love is used like a credit card, silence isn't kindness, it's compliance. My voice was calm, measured, true. I posted it to my private account, didn't tag anyone, didn't need to. Within hours, the comments trickled in. I remember your voice. Are you her mother? This doesn't match the other story. Proof? I closed the laptop. Let them come. The email came late at night. Subject line, Family Clarity Session. Valora had sent a Zoom link and a vague promise of mature discussion. I stared at it for a long time, the cursor blinking on my screen like a dare. When I finally joined, Valora and Avon were already on, their faces lit by the soft glow of ring lights. My sister Julia was logged in too, her camera off, just her name hovering in a quiet square. Thanks for joining, Mom, Valora said, voice sweet as syrup. We just want to clear the air. But I knew this wasn't peace, it was performance. We've all been under stress, she continued, and your reactions have made things more difficult. Reactions? I asked, tilting my head. You manipulated everyone with your silence, Avon jumped in. You knew what you were doing. I smiled, just a little. Are you sure you want to continue this? Valora's expression tightened. Avon's smirk faded. With a steady hand, I shared my screen. A folder titled Receipts opened. Scanned documents, email chains, loan summaries. I zoomed into one. Avon's forged signature, taking out a car loan in Valora's name 3 years ago. Another showed him using her social security number for a failed tech startup. Valora's face dropped. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she whispered. "You never asked," I replied. Silence. And then Julia's camera flicked on. "I didn't plan to speak," she said, clearing her throat. "But I remember something. About a year ago, Valora. You said you'd make sure Mom's money ended up in the right hands. You were talking to Avon. I pretended I didn't hear, but I did." Valora's composure cracked. "You don't understand family loyalty." "No," Julia said. "I understand manipulation." I turned my camera back on myself, full screen. "You've all said your part," I said calmly. "Now it's my turn." I leaned in, steady, eyes sharp. "You can twist stories online, paint me the villain, but truth doesn't vanish just because you don't like it." There was a beat of heavy silence. "I'll let the lawyer handle the rest." And I ended the call. Back in the quiet of my home, I sat still, absorbing the heat left in the room. My chest was tight but no longer trembling. I walked to the hallway closet and opened the box of Eli's old art projects. His little handprints, his notes to Nana, all taped with glitter and love. I whispered to no one. I raised a daughter who thinks pain equals power. But I remember when she needed me for bedtime stories. Then I turned off the lights and locked the door. Not for fear. For finality. The morning sun had barely broken through the clouds when I stepped outside to tend my roses. Dew clung to the petals like the last fragments of tears that no longer needed to be cried. I ran my fingers along a soft bloom, remembering when Valora planted this one as a child, bright pink and proud. Now it bloomed without her, as if reminding me, life goes on, even when certain people don't return to your garden. Mr. Levin shuffled through the gate that separated our yards. A quiet man, widowed 3 years now, always with dirt beneath his fingernails and wisdom buried in simplicity. "Beautiful morning," he said, adjusting his wide-brimmed hat. "It is," I replied, still gazing at the rosebush. He followed my line of sight. "Sometimes pruning is mercy." I looked at him, a bit startled. "Dead branches steal the bloom from what's still living," he added gently, then tipped his head and walked off. His words hung in the air like perfume. I went back to clipping, this time not just for beauty, but for clarity. At my desk, I unfolded a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. "Dear Valora," it started. My pen moved without hesitation, crafting sentences I knew she'd never read. I wasn't writing for her. I was writing for the mother in me who still needed to speak. "You won't remember the hours I stood behind you, at school plays, hospital bedsides, lonely lunches, but I do. You won't remember how I covered for your mistakes, even when I should have corrected them. I do. And maybe one day you'll understand that being loved doesn't mean being agreed with." The words were quiet but certain. I folded the letter, stared at it for a long moment, then tore it clean down the center. Closure doesn't need delivery. Sometimes when the house is too still, my mind drifts back to the therapist I saw after Jonah died. She once told me, "You're not the villain in their reinvention of history." I never knew how much I needed that sentence until this year. I've lived most of my life being the background, silent support, quiet fix, invisible glue. But I am not a footnote in someone else's story. I am a chapter of my own, and I'm done trying to edit myself into someone's fantasy. With steady hands, I opened my phone gallery. Photos of Eli, Valora, holidays that tried to look happier than they were. I didn't delete them out of hate, just readiness. Readiness to stop pretending. Readiness to stop hurting myself with the past. At the bottom of the drawer was a small key, Valora's spare to my house. I walked to the porch and left it in the mailbox. No note, no drama, just distance that no longer needed a door. Later that afternoon, Mr. Levin waved at me from his porch. "Farmer's market?" he asked. I hesitated, then smiled. "Sure, it's time I bought strawberries just for me." We walked quietly side by side, the kind of silence that didn't ache. In the distance, children laughed and vendors called out prices, and the world continued, loud and alive. I thought of the roses, of pruning, of mercy. And maybe next season, I'll grow tomatoes again. The rain had started sometime before dawn, a slow, insistent tapping on the windows that refused to let up. By late morning, it had graduated to a full-blown storm. I stood by the kitchen window, my coffee untouched, watching water streak down the glass like it had something urgent to say. It was the kind of morning that made you feel like the world wanted you to pause. Reflect. Remember. The mailbox groaned when I opened it, swollen and reluctant. I shuffled through advertisements, a water bill, and a damp manila envelope with a smudged return address, Waters Finch Law. The seal was already torn from the rain. I should have left it alone. But I didn't. The papers inside were dry enough. Folded neatly was a letter, not addressed to the law firm at all. My name wasn't on it either, but the handwriting was Valora's, and it wasn't meant for me. I stared at it. The part of me trained to respect boundaries, once called too polite by friends, too soft by my late husband, held firm for a beat. Then I unfolded the page. "She doesn't even realize how much she cost me, emotionally and financially," Valora had written. "The therapist said it's okay to cut her off. I just needed to hear it from someone neutral. Now I can finally breathe." I read it again, not fast, not skimming, word by word like they might change if I took my time. She plays the victim so well. The retired nurse with a heart of gold. You'd think she deserved a sainthood, but she's draining, always needing to be needed. The ink didn't smear. The sting did. I pressed my palm to the paper, grounding myself in something physical. The familiar ache tightened in my chest, that old companion of disbelief and restraint. She doesn't see what she's doing. That's the sad part. It's not evil, just suffocating. The wedding was our chance to make something ours, free from guilt. And of course, she made it about her. I folded the letter, calmly, deliberately. I didn't rip it. I didn't scream. "This wasn't meant for me," I said out loud. But it found me anyway. I placed it back into the envelope, slipped it into my cardigan pocket. The rain was still falling, as if it had something left to say. I didn't grab an umbrella. Just my keys. My boots. I stepped out into the downpour, not in defiance, but in declaration. I needed the cold. The sting. The noise. "Elaine!" Mr. Levin's voice cut through the air, muffled by weather and worry. He stood on his porch with his dog, holding a newspaper like a makeshift shield. "You okay?" I didn't stop, just lifted a hand. Sometimes clarity doesn't come in the quiet, it comes in the downpour. Back home, soaked to the bone, I peeled off my coat and laid it over the radiator. The envelope was still dry. It had been pressed close to my chest the whole time. In the study, I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one I hadn't touched since before the wedding. I started a new folder, labeled it in red ink, "For the attorney, if needed." I slipped the letter in, alongside copies of bank statements, screenshots, and the forged loan application. Quietly, I locked the drawer. Then I whispered to no one, just in case. I stood there a long while, listening to the house breathe. I won't be caught off guard again. And that's not revenge. That's survival. The late afternoon light shifted softly across my living room as my phone chimed. Not a ringtone, but a gentle ping announcing a new voicemail. Nothing like the usual reminders or alerts. I pressed play. A voice, unfamiliar yet familiar, warmed the silence. "I'm sorry you were hurt. She's drowning in fear, not hate. I wish I could make things right. That was it. No names. Just soft regret, distant and haunting. I held the phone close, tears threatening, but I didn't cry. I leaned back, letting the words settle. Because sometimes, apologies don't need an audience. Later, Mr. Levin appeared at my open window, holding a small bouquet of white daisies. "Thought you might like these," he said quietly. "They're for fresh starts." I smiled, warmth rising. We sat in the garden together, not speaking much, not needing to. Just two quiet souls finding solace in flowers and shared understanding. "Sometimes the bridge opens quietly," he said. And I believed him. Back inside, I opened the front door to a plain, unremarkable envelope sitting on the doormat. No return address. Inside was a wedding photo of Valora, radiant in her gown, and there, draped over the back of a chair, was my favorite shawl. Unused, folded with care. No caption, no message. Just a moment captured in time, untouched by hurt. I sat before it for a long time, my heart uncoiling. The shawl, it meant she remembered. At least something. Maybe more than I dared admit. I picked up my phone and sent my lawyer a message. "Hold off. I'm choosing peace. For now." A single word landed back. Wise. No plans. No legal threats. Silence as protection was more powerful than any courtroom. That evening, dusk wrapped around my home like a soft blanket. I placed the photo on the mantel, arranged the daisies beside it. I stood in silence, watching the shadows blend. Quietly, I whispered, "I may never be in that picture. But I can still smile for her, from here." Soft footsteps startled me. Mr. Levin set a small envelope by the flowers, gave a nod, and quietly walked away. I touched the daisies, whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the evening's glow faded into promise, and deep inside me, a new resolve bloomed. Tomorrow, I'll plant daisies in the front yard. For me. For hope. The dawn was gentle, almost hesitant, like the world was offering a quiet apology through mist and muted light. I knelt among the daisy seedlings I had planted weeks ago, tender green shoots reaching toward a pale sky. Rain beads lingered on petals, one droplet catching the light just so, reminding me that even the smallest signs of life matter. I took a breath, inhaling the rich scent of damp earth, and felt something settle inside. A warmth that wasn't longing or grief, but a soft, steady reassurance that life continues. Mr. Levin appeared in the garden gate, morning coffee in hand, and that familiar calm about him. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't say anything dramatic. Instead, he offered the steaming cup and only added, "Growth takes time." I let that settle into me. The daisies, once fragile and newly planted, were thriving now. They didn't rush to bloom. They rose in their own time, as had I. I paused amid the blooms, memories drifting in, conversations with Valora about the little worries and grand dreams she had shared as a teenager. At the county fair, planning for college, late-night talks that stretched to dawn when she couldn't sleep. Those moments were untouched by hurt, pure. I felt a quiet eagerness in my chest, not to reclaim those days, but to honor them as something real, something worth holding gently. I didn't resent the distance anymore. I simply held on to what was good. Back inside, I placed pen to paper, writing a letter to Valora, not to send, but to acknowledge my own peace. May you find joy that isn't measured in price tags. May memories outlast disagreements. I hope one day you return, not for what was lost, but for what could still grow. Love, Mom. I folded the letter softly and placed it beneath my favorite rose plant just outside the kitchen window. It felt like burying sorrow in soil rich enough to nurture something new. That evening, as the sky turned lavender, I brushed off dirt from my hands and stepped inside with calm certainty. I whispered to my reflection in the hall mirror. I'm still here. Rooted. Not broken. And I'll bloom. Season after season. Mr. Levin brushed past on his way home and peered through the window with a soft smile. I gave a gentle nod, and he nodded back. I closed the curtains, but just before they settled, I glanced back at the garden. Here's to new beginnings, me, and maybe one day her too. I've come to understand that healing doesn't always come wrapped in forgiveness or confrontation. Sometimes it looks like planting daisies, closing old drawers, and choosing not to respond when you finally have all the ammunition. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. As someone who's lived through betrayal disguised as love, let me tell you, peace is not something you're given, it's something you grow. We don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to choose the boundaries we set. Maybe you've been in my shoes, or maybe you're just now stepping into them. Either way, I hope my story reminds you that your worth isn't measured by how much you give to those who keep taking. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say nothing, and start over anyway. What about you? Have you ever had to let go of someone you thought would never turn on you, or learned the power of silence when everything inside you screamed to speak? I'd love to hear your story. Let's share, learn, and grow together. If this video touched your heart, type 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't like it, tell me why. I'd still love to hear your thoughts. If you found value in this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Healing starts with a voice. And maybe, just maybe, that voice is yours too.